Join us on another exciting adventure of Exertus. Over the centuries, many stories have shifted and been exaggerated. So what are the things about the Vimana which stand the test of time? Well, the Vimana are essentially these giant bells in the sky. It would seem that they are made of metal. However, this is up to debate as well. It could be that they're made out of a number of materials. More and more, I'm not convinced that these are solid, even if they're metal balloons, which might not sound logical until you learn about nanotechnology, but hear me out, it exists, and there are metallic aerogels, which are lighter than air. But there are even stories that they're made simply of the earth, or rather the iron pulled out of the earth, perhaps through electromagnets, and then assembled within the sky, as if somehow the magnetism polarized in the grains of iron from the rock put together these flying ships. Another story common around the world. In Spain, for instance, the story of iron pulled from the earth to make flying ships is over 1,000 years old, and apparently the Inca and Maya have similar stories as well. What's funny about these flying ships is they do look a lot like some of the military zeppelins which we have seen earlier, and some of the futuristic crafts which we will see later. In general, they're built like temples, and it would seem as if a lot of temples are built in their effigy. In other ways, they seem like fractals and rockets. They also seem to be designed in a certain harmonic shape in order to hold their structure, and yet guided by some sort of a center column. These ancient flying bells look an awful lot like the UFO Foo Fighters from World War II, which they probably should, as they were so interested in India and ancient Bhagavad Gita. So it's almost apparent that these are based literally on the Vimanas themselves, from the Vedic literature aware German scientists. But the Foo Fighters were also built with the help of the technology of Victor Schauberger and a number of other people involved with the Thule and the Vril, particularly the luminaries who were supposedly getting these designs from the Pleiadians, such as Maria Orsic, a super hot witch who said she was in touch with light beings, and if not, was one of the craziest, most brilliant liars involved with aerospace. Then again, considering the things going on today, it might just be part of some sort of trend. But she didn't just give advice like Dr. Cleo, she gave blueprints for some of the craziest spaceships that we've ever had designs for, and intricate parts of their mechanisms, such as the ionic propulsion and induction of torsion. What's crazy is this technology seems to have been developed for centuries. It only seems to have become noticed by photography in the 20th century. In fact, looking at this design of the aerogenerative cone from 1850s next to the Thule Die Glocke, the Black Bell, you can basically see they're the same design. In fact, the main difference is you cannot see inside of the new military design, whereas in the 1850s, the original centrifugal torsion monolithic pillar obelisk in the center of the bell, as well as the torsion spiral mechanism, are clearly apparent. And to be honest, this is kind of some of the bummer with the militarization of this technology. Much like with corporate intellectual property, where this stuff becomes hidden. A lot of this stuff we haven't been able to talk about in a long time, just because it's been associated with people who use it in a bad light. And I don't really want to go too deep into that part of history right now, so I'm using this picture from Star Wars instead. But there are a lot of parables actually that make it pretty perfect, namely the adaptation of otherwise ambiguous, if not benevolent, technology for the singular vision of authoritative control is really a kind of bummer which reduces technology from the grandeur of artisans and creativity, often associated with mythical divinity, and replacing it with a rather purposeful, but therefore much less broad and more rigid of a creation. That's one of the reasons I actually think episode 1 is so cool, is because they have technology that's pretty much useless except for entertainment. I mean, it's sort of the generation of laser discs in space. Robots are a little bit more flashy and personable, and the spaceships have just a little bit more fun. I mean, I'm pretty sure the Millennium Falcon had a bar, and this is another reason why I bring up the tangent agent of the mythical reality of Star Wars. Because even though it's Disney, it was George Lucas, I think there's some interesting stuff that Star Wars hides. Amongst so much, one of the things is models of spaceships, as well as robotics. Star Wars has these diligently illustrated, detailed, patentable drawings of spaceships, their interiors and their mechanisms. And like DuckTales, you'll find there's a lot of this stuff that ends up in our own reality. Similarly, discs were illustrated in uncanny designs. And then there's some really low-key stuff in Star Wars, like the Mon Calamari cruisers, because the Rebels have these weird-looking inflatable spaceships. And I say inflatable because they are expansive as opposed to the Imperial crafts, which have a sort of origami design. They could be folded flat. A lot of the technology for the building of the original special effects was done through taking boat and airplane plastic models and building them together into the new spaceships. But is this thing really just another piece of the movies? Similarly with R2-D2, a drone supposedly designed to look like a trash can, but in so many ways, the practicality of his guttural desktop computer PCB board and his 360-degree head made it so that R2-D2 found his way into the designs of the Macintosh computer as well as Alexa. One of the better examples is the AT-AT, which in Star Wars, it's even recognized that it's not a perfect vehicle, and the AT-AT actually falls over, similar to some sort of a cattle ranching scene in a movie. Well, the AT-AT is essentially real, and it's been improved. In fact, Boston Dynamics has created this vehicle at least a decade ago, which you cannot kick over. I mean, you can try, but it will not fall over. And imagine this thing with a machine gun strapped to its head, and about 150 feet tall. But I decidedly wanted to go another way with the virology because this is really not what this is about. And it's really not my interest or Victor Schauberger's. In fact, Victor Schauberger got most of his ideas from nature itself. Living in the woods around lumberjacks, inspired by the birds and the flowers, by the biology of nature, which required the stones and the springs, the rocks, the soil and the seeds, all to create a symbiotic nature that was alive and healthy. This magical mechanical system of nature was essential to the 1800s understanding of the folk movement, which was a return to the ideals of naturalism and an escape from the Eurocentric metropolitan ideals, which many associated with the darkness of soot and coal, sickness and plague. Because of that, there was a major exodus in Europe. Throughout the 16th, 17th, 18th, 19th, and 20th century, millions of Europeans left Europe to escape to the Americas. And that brings us to NIMSA.
Where is this airing right now?
Recent Talk
program is coming to you via Relay 2 satellite, a spacecraft orbiting the Earth at a speed of over 17,000 miles per hour.
Hey, everybody, tune in to Recent Tartarian.
Recent Tartarian.
Exertus.